So here we go. So I think we're coming in, so that's good. Let's just have a look here. There we go. Yeah, we're in. Hi, Sheila.
Hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Great, and thank you so much for joining us today and having this chat with us. So I know within the group, within the Dog Centre Care group, you've got a lot of fans. A lot of people have kind of worked with you, gone through your education through your school, and have been influenced by you. And I would class myself as that. Actually, I really enjoyed that time when we first met in person, and I got the chance to spend a day with you, and it really did a couple of things for me. It validated some of the things that I was already thinking, and it brought awareness to new stuff that I hadn't really thought about, or new aspects of that, things that I could connect on really easily. So many of the people in the group are already big fans and they know who you are, but some won't. So Sheila, tell us who you are.
Okay. So yeah, I'm somebody who gives courses. I suppose primarily, really, I work with people and their dogs, and throughout everything, I try to keep my feet on the ground in the real world. That is absolutely fundamental. So with my own dog, with people and their dogs, clients, yeah, all kinds of things. But then taking that really to other people, to do courses, to give sort of classes. Well, it's not really classes, but it's kind of individual work really more than anything else. But yeah, short courses, longer courses, accredited courses for people who want to become behaviourists and trainers, people from rescue centres who want to give the dogs in their care a better life, and who want to look at good practice, and you know, and those really the kinds of things that we do. So yeah, accredited courses, short courses, a lot of practical stuff. I've done a lot of theory in the past, or I've taught a lot of theory, but I think the key thing for me is trying to translate that for people into a reality that they can share with their dogs, and that's really been a focus.
And your IPAX courses, there's a lot of depth there, isn't there? You get there, you know, for people who go through IPAX 1, IPAX 2, yeah. They would have covered a huge amount of quite deep. There's a lot of depth and breadth in those courses, isn't there?
They have. They have. It's, you know, there are topics within those courses where we touch on bits and pieces, especially in the IPAX 1. We touch on bits and pieces, a little bit of learning theory, a little bit about life stages and so on. But what we try to do is to not give those people, or not to regurgitate what they can find in books on the internet. It's you know, that's something that's out there. They can read up about it, they can find out about it, they can go on websites and talk to people, and there's a lot of information there. But we do encourage them to find out more and to bring that with them. But what we try to do is to give them a different angle on things, to get them to see these things, and to think about them, and to think about the implications of them. So, you know, rather than just kind of understanding about puppies, for example, and their stages of development, what we try to do is to get them to bear that in mind, but then think about what they could do to help those puppies, or to have something at each point of their stages of development that would take them further, that would be beneficial for them. For example, you know, what the breeder might do, and how that transition from breeder to new owner could be, rather than a kind of a pick up and take home, and that's the first time in the car, and you know, those kinds of things. But the fundamental thing for us is looking at the dog itself, to look at it as an individual, to look at its needs, to look at what it's trying to say, and to understand the voice that it has, to give it a voice, to understand what it's saying. And really, the biggest part for everybody on our courses is observation. Without observation, then you haven't got a relationship with your dog, in our opinion. So, and the other thing is interaction with that dog, is communication, is when I say handling, I'm not talking about kind of hands-on things. I'm talking about every aspect of your daily life with your dog is handling. You know, every movement that you make, every little look that you give, that's all handling, that's all interaction, it's all communication. And that is just a massive part of you know, the courses. The other part of the course that we've got, so we've kind of got the IPACS 1, which is the basic types of things, some of the things I've mentioned, you know, a bit about behaviour problems and so on. IPACS 2, we've taken a very different angle, really. The stance that we're looking at is about how to help a dog to develop what we call real life skills. And you know, I've seen bits and pieces on Facebook recently about, you know, skills, and it's the same as training, isn't it? And commands, and we used to call these things life skills, but we can't call them that anymore because this term has been taken to, it's a fancy way of saying training. It's a fancy way of saying sit down, you know, have your feet touched, be able to cope with people in the street who want to pat you on the head. That's not what we're talking about at all. What we're talking about are skills that dogs can develop, competencies, taking their abilities and to help them to develop into a dog who can have a voice, but a voice that is relevant to the situation, a dog who can communicate adeptly, can carry on. I'm sorry if I'm waffling. If
no.
You may never get a word in edgeways here, Andy, aren't you? Once I get started, I can't stop.
No, it's interesting stuff. Carry on.
So it's really, we want a dog who's not only comfortable in life, but has got quality of life. That means that they can influence situations. That means that they have the ability to have a discussion with you, to influence you, to take notice of what they need, not necessarily what they want, that's two different things, but what they actually need at a specific time or in life, and who can influence other dogs or what you do according to what they need. I'll give you an example of this. So let's say that you're walking along and you have a dog who sees another dog and is a little bit worried about it. What we would like our dog to do is to be able to say to us whether he would like to move away. In other words, to influence us to move away, to just go right out of the situation because he's assessed it, he's processed it, he doesn't feel that it's something that he can deal with, and that he has the skills to tell us that this dog I can't cope with. Or if he sees another dog that he says, you know, I think I feel a bit more comfortable with this one, to, you know, to be able to have a conversation with that dog in a way that is calm, sensible, and will engage the other dog on the same kind of level. But that means that our dog has to have the skills to assess that dog, has to be able to assess the behaviour, has to be able to look at the potential of that dog, how he's moving, what he is, and to show an appropriate behaviour. And that's not according to our concept, what we think is appropriate, but it's actually what is appropriate for the situation. So he's making sensible decisions. And that's really the kind of thing, one of the kinds of things that we're trying to promote in these dogs.
And what you're saying there brings together actually very neatly the discussions we've had in the kind of the Facebook Live running up to this, because you know, Rachel Leather was talking about trauma and about the truth for the dog and what they're going through, and things have to be kind of on their kind of timeline, not ours. You know, Laura Donaldson talking about slow thinking, cognitive appraisal, giving the dogs a chance to be able to go through a self-regulatory process. Linda Rugas talking about, you know, we've got to stop our own narratives getting in the way of actually seeing what the dog needs. So you've brought all that together really lovely, actually, on that. And I think this is the big block, I think, for some people, is seeing beyond their own worldview of what that dog should be doing, and what that safety looks like. And actually, the dog is trying to kind of work through on that. And you were mentioning before about giving the dogs those skills. Do you find that because of the kind of structured educational system that we have more usually, with a heavy emphasis on lots of cues, that's when the dogs first come into working with you, you have to help them reconnect to some of those innate connective skills?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we have a dog at the moment who has lived with his owners for about 8 years. And in those 8 years, what he's learned to do really is to bite them. And, you know, if he feels that they're not, if he feels that he can't express himself in any other way, he's just being pushed to do that. And so, you know, the first session with him, the first practical session, was helping him to feel that he could influence things without having to resort to biting. You know, we had to build him up to being able to move, actually. He was so used to being off lead, he couldn't move on lead. He was so used to being told what to do, he couldn't think. He didn't know what to do. And so for some dogs like that, who are, you know, there are dogs who are kind of quite free and who can explore and who can just take a step in life and take a step on a path. And there are dogs like him who, because it was so totally different for him to have a voice, it was kind of, I don't know what to do. I can't move. I can't think. You know, and there's an element of stress coming in. What we needed to do was to take that pressure off him, because having a choice sometimes is a pressure. You know, for some dogs, if you say, what do you want? And they're so used to being told, they will say, I don't know. I don't know what the choices are. I don't know. And if I did make one, would I dare to make one? You know, so yeah, this dog has been treated for all kinds of things, you know, given treats for moving, for, I don't know, coming back, for all kinds of things. And that's become a crutch for him. When he feels out of his depth, what he tends to do is to just go and say, I need a treat, because I don't know what else to do. You see some dogs like that with a ball or with a, you know, with something else or a stick, and they'll pick something up just because actually having that in their mouth means that they don't have to think, they don't have to make a choice. So with this dog, you know, yes, we've had to work through things and give him the opportunity to start to realize that he can influence things, but we've had to do it very gradually in a very different way than we would have with many of the other dogs. But I think for us, our process, probably like just about everybody else in a way, the process doesn't necessarily begin with the dog, because unless the owners can see what the dog is, who the dog is, then things don't change. And so our introduction to people is to help their dog, or help them to just see their dog, to see what he stands for, who he is, what he's got to say, and not necessarily to them, but to other dogs and other people. You know, we just point out things. We don't interpret, we observe. And there's a massive difference between those two things, I think. And the point is to say, oh, you know, something like, oh, that's interesting. He's just had a shake. Yeah. And then later on, you know, oh, that's interesting. You know, when you moved over there, he had another shake. And we kind of point this out. And suddenly they start to connect that when they're moving in a certain way, or when something's happening that he's finding a little bit difficult, it may be that that's a behaviour that he chooses to kind of, to feel a bit more easy about things. But we point out what he does and start to give them the opportunity of seeing it, and then starting, not necessarily drawing conclusions from it, but starting to see that all of this is communication.
That's God, there's so much there, and I to unpack a little bit, because I think I think you're right. I think some dogs can almost be, there's a risk of the dog almost becoming institutionalized through training.
Yeah.
And if we think about ourselves, how often do we think about our own behavior? Most of our behavior is quite free flowing. It's an expression of self, right? It's an expression of our emotional self. It's a connection to what we need to feel safe, or to find those connections. Mm-hmm. And we know as humans what it feels like to have our behavior externally and artificially, one would say, controlled in different situations. School is a really good example of that. Many people struggle with that hugely through a structured educational system at school, working in the workplace, and sadly some people in difficult, challenging relationships, whether that's with a partner or family members, where you can't express your authentic self. And I think there's got to be a lot more discussion and exploration about what are the effects of having dogs who are compliant to our training. What are the possible knock-on effects for dogs who are so connected to cues and to reinforcement of behaviors that we want, that might, and quite possibly don't, have any internal value to them?
Yes.
So the dogs that you're talking about, and I've worked with dogs similarly myself, and I think we all find our own different ways of looking through these things, of course, but because ultimately the only thing, the only living entity that knows the truth is the dog, right? So we're all as humans just trying to work stuff out. But I think, like you say, that we have to kind of allow that dog so much unwind time away from the past norms, to kind of allow them to connect to their own authentic behaviors that we can then look through. It's an important point, I think, an important thing that I think as an industry, I know people don't like the word industry, but anyways, whatever we want to call ourselves, but I think we need to explore this more.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so many dogs are completely lost if they aren't told what to do, and I find that very sad. I actually come from a teaching background. And so I taught kids for about over 20 years. And, you know, in my teaching, my job was to teach a subject. I was teaching the child, but I was also teaching a subject. But I recognized that a lot of those children weren't in a position to learn the subject that I was supposed to be teaching. But within a classroom, I had 38 kids sometimes in my classroom. And so what I tended to do was a lot of outside of the class, you know, at lunch times, at break times, after school. And if somebody wanted to come and talk to me and discuss things, then that was when I did the work that I actually felt I needed to be doing, rather than the work I was being paid to do. You know, it's just because there wasn't time for that in the classroom. And I just feel a lot of the dogs are asking for help, and they don't know how to ask for help, but they need that extra help. And it's very difficult within a typical class situation of giving those dogs what they really need. It's because they're so individual. And each dog You know, there might be traits of another dog that we've seen. There might be similarities with something, you know, something that we've come across before or whatever. But we have to look at each dog as a total individual within his own right. And we have to find out about him, what makes him work, how he can deal with life, and what makes it better for him. And I think that's what we do to try to improve the quality of the dog's life. In trying to do that, we also improve the quality of the owner's life. You've got a happy dog, or a more contented dog, perhaps, rather than a happy dog, then, you know, we've got a more contented owner. Yeah. So what we look at is we take what the dog can do, and that's our starting point. Whereas what I used to do when I used to do obedience training was to look at what the dog couldn't do and to put it right.
I think it's really interesting you sharing a moment ago about your background as a teacher, because since I've been running some of these chats, I've had a lot of people who have been teachers or are carers who are teachers reaching out to point out of the huge friction and conflict they have by being in a structured educational system where you have a syllabus that you have to connect to, and their kind of own job is being measured by quite arbitrary results. And their real desire to connect the children in a very authentic way, and to allow more of the connected experimental learning that kids really need, rather than something that is very arbitrary in nature. And of course, the problem with the human educational system is that it's not designed necessarily for the betterance of the child. It is a kind of it's there for what society needs from another generation of young people. You know,
that's right.
Arbitrary way. Yeah. So, if we think back then on your journey into this, then you said to me before, when we discussed before, that you started off in quite a traditional way with training. You had quite a traditional outlook, you know, about doing a kind of an operant way. What was it that, was there any specific individual influences that made you change that approach, or did you kind of, was it a gradual process, or did you wake up one morning and thought, this doesn't feel right, I need to look for something else? How did you so fundamentally shift? Because I know there's a lot of people who listen who are very much looking to move and change how their direction is, and I think it's great to hear somebody who has done that.
I think my first experience of training was when I had a rescue collie, border collie, a young one, just about 5.5 months old. I took him to training classes because I wasn't coping with him, actually. Well, no, that's not fair. He wasn't coping with me. And so I took him along because I knew that I needed some help, and I thought that he did. Probably he didn't, but I certainly did. But the help I got was training him to perform, and he became a fantastic performer. You know, he was brilliant at all kinds of exercises, and everybody looked at him and said, "Oh, I wish I had a dog like that." And the second that we left the training hall, he would fly at anybody and any dog, and he was a fighter and he was a biter. And I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know what else there was. And I was trying to look for other things, but I couldn't find anything. I really couldn't find anything. I knew that this wasn't right. But I couldn't find my own way. I didn't know what else, you know, if I took that away, then I felt that I had nothing. And so I carried on in it for too long. And the worst thing was that I didn't realize at the time, but I was giving over responsibility to somebody else. And I was kind of almost giving his life away. And what I should have been doing was to take that responsibility for myself, to recognize it wasn't the right thing for him. And it certainly wasn't the right thing for me either. and to get out of there. But then what, you know? And so that was when I knew it was wrong, really at the beginning. But because there was nothing else, I ended up, you know, becoming a trainer as well. And I felt uncomfortable with what I was doing, but I was doing it I was trying to make it as pleasant as I could, but I was still doing conventional obedience, really. And I kind of thought, okay, well, I'll try out agility and some nose work and tracking and different things. And it just wasn't right. It wasn't the right thing for him. And then there was a crisis in my life, and I ended up withdrawing from life, if you like, and withdrawing my dog from life. And that was when we did nothing, you know. So I'd been overdoing everything, far too much exercise, far too much stimulation. My dog was absolutely bouncing off the walls, and I just wasn't coping. And so we kind of withdrew, and I started to get to a point where I could bring my thoughts back together again and reevaluate. And I started to look at what he was doing, and I started to read up about stress. And I started to look at stress in humans, first of all, and I was trying to help myself out, really. It was a self-help thing. And the more I saw in me, the more I saw in him. And I thought, you know, I need to start looking, I need to start really observing him and thinking about him, not focusing on him. That's too heavy. I just need to look at him and think about him. And I started to observe other dogs and go out and see what they were doing and think about what was helping him, what was helping him to feel better, you know, what was helping him to feel safer, because I certainly wasn't safe. This goes back to what Rachel Leather was talking about, and you know, and Dan Hughes in his books, he talks about, you know, safe relationships. I wasn't that safe relationship, and I wasn't providing him with the security that he needed. What I was so intent on doing was to go out there, train him, and you know, and to get him to perform, and there was nothing in it for him. So I started to do these classes, or this obedience side of things, and I didn't feel comfortable. So in the end, I thought, you know, I'm going to leave this training club, and I'm just going to. I'd like to do something with dogs on my own. I recognised that I needed to change for him. I recognised that I could bring something different for other dogs. So I thought, I'll throw all of that away and I'll start with something else. And I started some fun classes for dogs. Sounds great. In essence, the people were having fun, the dogs absolutely weren't. So I did a bit of that, threw that out of the window. That's not working. So then I started to, we're talking about the 90s now. I was going to courses and reading books and trying to find what I was missing. And I couldn't find it anywhere. So then I started clicker training, tried to do all of my classes in clicker training. Wasn't the right thing, just wasn't the right thing. And I just didn't know where to go. I knew that none of these things were right for me. They just weren't right for me, and they weren't right for him. And so actually, eventually, I just started to do some little walks. I tried to find somebody who might have a dog that was sensible. So I went out to the local park and had a look to see if there was somebody around who'd got a nice, calm dog. And I saw one or two people, I don't know what they thought of me. And I left him at home, of course. And I just went to approach them and said, you know, I wonder if it would be possible to walk with your dog now and again at a distance. And I thought, you know, perhaps just something like that. Anyway, I managed to find a couple of people. We walked at a big distance with, you know, using trees and barriers and all kinds of things. And I just did it in a way that was helping him to feel comfortable, letting him have interactions with that dog, just very tiny ones. And the environmental influence was just fantastic because, you know, we weren't in an open space. It wasn't in that typical training class or field or hall, or, you know, it was actually in context. And it was the real world. And so I started to see an improvement with him. And then I thought, yeah, okay, I'm getting an idea now about what I want. No demands, no commands, no for me. Rewards, he's better than that. He is smarter than that. He knows when something's successful. And what I need to do is I need to find a way of kind of letting him feel that I understand when he feels successful. It's his success. It's not my success. It's his communication. And so, yeah, it was more about seeing how he felt and kind of these intrinsic rewards, if you like, he got from feeling good about something that he'd done, that I could just catch his eye and say, yeah, you know, that's nice, isn't it? What we're doing, we're sharing this. And it became sharing, it became communication, it became a togetherness.
You know, that, so again, so much stuff there. I think it's really, I'm hoping people will feel the same way I do when I hear you share that, because a lot of what you said is really brave stuff, right? It's just that recognition of, oh my God, I'm failing my dog. I need to do more here. You went through a huge amount of cognitive reappraisal of your own there. And the last bit you were talking about, I think this is something that we've really got to consider more about this notion of what is intrinsically rewarding and reinforcing, if we want to use that term, because most of our connection with our dogs, those moments, I call it emotional relevancy, those moments when the dog's done, you know, made a connection, or the dog's kind of managed to go through a process of their own, they get so much from us just by how we look, how we connect. When we think about ourselves with our loved ones, we don't necessarily want to be paid for that connection. The actual connection itself is the payment. And we talk a lot about this notion of, well, if you're going to work, you want to get paid. And I think that's probably true when we think about a structured training style thing, if we're really trying to get that dog to push beyond what they would normally do to give us something. But when it's something they're intrinsically going through themselves, through an authentic process for them, we've had thousands of years with these beautiful animals to have a real connection socially and supportively through our relationship with them. And it's interesting for me when I've heard people say that somehow isn't enough. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of enough for the dog, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, there are lots of key moments, you know, that change you, I think. And the key moments for me are seeing a dog learn, but not learn what I want him to learn, not kind of something, not an owner-centered or a caregiver-centered goal, if you like, or an instructor-led goal, but actually something that he is experiencing, and you can see him working it out. And often it's for me, it's often conversations with other dogs, and seeing him kind of thinking, okay, you know, what's going on here? Does this work? And see that response. Or actually, you know, I have in my mind a video that many of our students have seen, which is of a dog in some trees and a child, and this is a very, very long way away, a child and some people walking along a path. And this dog is generally quite worried, or was very worried about people. And he's such a long way away, but he's using the tree to look and to see what they're doing and to come to terms with it. And this processing that he is doing, it goes on for minutes and minutes. And he's just thinking and he's just working it out. And you can just see the cogs turning. And then he can decide at what point he feels comfortable to be able to leave that behind. And and then he is supported by, actually it was Winnie, who was with him. He's supported by her, and when it's time for him to go, he just starts to make a movement, and she can move with him, and off they go, and he's so satisfied, and just has learned a huge amount from that, and so yes, the environment's helped, but the support has helped. Somebody being there and not allowing him, but giving him opportunity, facilitating that learning, rather than interrupting it and stopping it and giving him a treat for what somebody else thinks is the right thing, just to let it move on. That for me is something that is just in my mind all the time, and is a fantastic point. It's a fantastic visual reminder for me of what learning is about.
Yeah, and especially that learning that is internally valuable to us. Invariably, it's the things that we come to those conclusions of our own. I think it's the same for the dogs, and inviting them to have the opportunity to process in a way that they can make sense, and have that, even if there's an element of elevation, but also have that, but then to kind of connect to a decompression that allows them to go through a self-regulatory process. And I use the word relief a lot, and finding relief yourself, finding things that you can find relief for, is hugely rewarding. And I think that's the same for a dog. I think that's something you kind of describing there, really, that allowing the dog chance to get what it needs from that situation, and then letting do you say, is it Winnie?
Yeah.
We know that, okay, I'm ready to move on now. We can move. This is great. I'm ready to kind of see what the next adventure life throws at me is.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, this dog was clearly aware of his own learning. We were aware of it. He was aware of it, and he took his time and was so thoughtful, and and knew when, that's fine. I've done what I need to. And I can take that information, thank you, and I can go away. I can process it, assimilate it, and and move on. And what was great was that Winnie was aware of what he was doing. Winnie was aware of every single step of what he's going through, and that's what we try to kind of facilitate in the people that we work with, the clients that we work with, and their dogs, to get them to see the reality of what's happening, not according to what they want to happen, well, not according to what their criteria are, but actually what they see is relevant for the dog. It's not just exposing that dog to a situation. It's actually, again, coming back to the safe, the safety. It's having a safe environment, but a real life environment. It's feeling that the dog can trust the person, and that the person knows enough about the dog to, they're not unpredictable mostly, they're pretty predictable. But I can understand why many people feel that dogs aren't predictable, because for them there's no pattern. So we try to put that pattern in place and to see what they're likely to do. And just to bring it all together.
And I think it's interesting how often, as a kind of an industry, I have to use that. I can't think of a better word, Sheila.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Because Linda Rugas she doesn't like that word at all. But anyway, if anybody knows a better word, let me know, and I'll try and think about it. But when you have a core of our colleagues who work very much within and look through an operant lens, a quadrant-based lens. Yeah, it's interesting how often I hear people say, "Oh, if you're not using food, somehow you're not positive reinforcement, or you're not
exactly,
and therefore by implication you're somehow aversive."
Yes.
By allowing dogs to have a connection through the leash, without it being that the dog is in a certain position, that somehow that's not positive reinforcement, you're somehow therefore by implication aversive. I just think this is the problem of being stuck. I call it the operant merry-go-round, as people know. If we're stuck on that wheel, we are going to miss so much of the insight that we need to ultimately try and learn about a dog's truth. And have you found that yourself? Have you been frustrated by that as you've gone through this kind of journey of your own?
I have. I mean, in a way, I have another admission to make, perhaps here, that, you know, I went through that for the 90s, really, and then, you know, in the early 2000s, I just hopped off that whole thing. I just couldn't cope with hearing it anymore, and I stopped reading those books. I stopped going to courses. I stopped learning from other people, really, because I just thought, you know, I'm hearing the same things again and again and again, and it's just not right for me, and it's not right for the dogs that I'd had by then. And so I just thought, you know, if I'm just going to push that all to one side. I can revisit it anytime. What I'm going to do is just think about what these dogs are doing, what I'm doing, and so I built things up, and I have been guilty in a way of shutting out the world, because in the early days I had so many negative remarks, so many people who thought I was a total nutter, so many, just so much negativity, really, and I didn't need it. I just thought, you know, I can't cope with this anymore, and so really I kind of I started to push that to one side and to just focus on what was the right path for me, and people joined us.
And I think that's what's so genuinely exciting about now, because one of the main reasons I wanted to get you on, and I wanted to get you on early on in these lives, is because I'm reminded quite rightly by people that some of the things I talk about has been spoken about and talked about and educated for quite a while with people like yourselves, authentic voices that introduce some of these thoughts that were beyond that kind of operant narrative, and have faced quite a lot of opposition about that back in the day. You know, your story is very similar to Turid and Linda and Laura and other people that I've spoken to. I get my own fair share of flack now even, but I think what we're recognizing is that there is a real desire now, I think a real feeling amongst professionals, and definitely with caregivers, Sheila, that we need something more, that we have to look forwards. Now, what is our vision for our relationship with dogs, how we support them and care for them? One thing that's very important, I think, is that we don't have to necessarily think in absolutes. So me personally, I'm still going through this transition. I haven't quite let go of food completely yet in what I do. There is still an element there, but even talking to you today, I'm thinking I've got to keep reappraising that and reduce it until I can, that thing you said earlier about feeling brave to let go of some stuff. I think everybody can really resonate with that, because it takes a bit of a thing, but nobody has to make a huge leap off a cliff on this stuff. You can just find, especially from our conversations, those truths. I know, within the group, some posts get put up that some people really find difficult to connect to. And what I would just say to anybody listening more generally is that that's okay. We can not think that that's right for us. The whole point is that we find our own truths through this journey, but ultimately, the only truth that will ultimately matter is the one of the dog. And we have to have these discussions, Sheila. And I think I feel myself with my journey through this that I've stopped taking on new clients at the moment, mainly because of the post-lockdown workload and all that kind of thing, but mainly because I'm looking at a big shift. And I need to kind of think about, when I take new clients on, when I get round to that probably in September time, I'm going to be doing things very, very differently from the get-go. Because you end up with a bit of a mixed culture as you go through a transitional thing of adopting new ways and new thoughts. You can end up having a bit of a mixed culture within your business.
I did for some time.
And that's great though, isn't it? Because what I'm getting from you today is I think, oh, actually, that's okay. I almost feel that's permission for me to feel that that's okay, because others go through that transition. You don't have to suddenly think, wow, okay, I kind of get this, but now I'm really scared because what do I do? How do I go from that to that? But it's allowing yourself open to the process, isn't it?
It is. And you know what everybody has to remember, and you know, those people who come on our courses now, whichever country it is, you know, what they have to remember is that what they see now and what they hear now is not how it's always been. You know, it took me a good 10 years really to be able to fully leave you know, kind of the operant side of things behind. And that's 10 years is quite a long time. And it's taken me a further 20 years to, you know, to kind of work through to what we're doing now. And, you know, do I still use food? Very rarely, but just now and again, if there's, I mean, one, I like giving food, you know, I enjoy giving a dog food. I really feel that I shouldn't be doing it because I control it. How ethical is it? You know, so that's a whole other side that I won't go into at the moment. But I do think there are ethical implications behind the use of food. But, you know, if I have a dog who is, let's say, getting into the car, who I know is in good health and, you know, and just kind of, I'd like him to get into the car and he does, then just sometimes I might give a little reward for that. And but it tends to be for finite behaviors, like, you know, that kind of thing. It's very rare that I do, but it's not because I think, oh, I mustn't give a reward now. It's because basically I don't ever have any food on me, really. I've you know, that went out of the window a very long time ago. And so I tend not to bribe or lure or anything else because I don't have the resources to do it. But actually, when you don't have food, I mean, I used to have food, different varieties of food. I used to have one of those wax jackets with pockets everywhere. And I used to have, you know, my a ball in one pocket, I don't know, a whistle in another. I used to have food in this pocket, a different type of food here, different, you know, and I was just covered in stuff that I thought would get my dog to come back when he was called, or that I thought would change his behavior or whatever. I was just reliant on all of these things. What I hadn't done was to build up the trust and a relationship with the dog, and that was what was missing. And so, yeah, but all of these things, they're a process, and you can change from one thing to another overnight in a way, but you can't feel it. You can't really work it through. And for everybody, it has to be their process of learning as well. And we shouldn't feel guilty about, you know, that process. It's, you know, what we have to do is we have to look at what we feel is the right thing for the dog, for our relationship, for our communication. And we need to live it. And we need to be true to the dog and true to ourselves. And yes, we'll have lapses now and again. I do now and again, but mostly, you know, it's what I believe in that's the right thing for the dog.
Gio, thank you so much for those words, because I think it's going to be many people listening, I think, like myself, who, and especially in my part of my own journey, really needs to hear those, because we've been indoctrinated ourselves, even the moment we are born, really, because we live in a very structured society. I say we go through a structured educational system. We have a lot of pressure put on us about right and wrong, what is good and bad, and how we're supposed to be. And most of us, when we come into animal training, we would have had a bias put on learning theory in regards to how we adapt that to get animals to do what we want them to do. So we, like you say, we can try and change things overnight, but it won't be authentic then. It won't be real, and we have to feel it through. And I'm probably at the stage with your, with regarding food for myself, some of the functional things, like you say, dog in the car and that kind of thing. When it comes to the dogs who struggle with various forms of social engagement or social processing, I would say I'm virtually there now without using food, actually, because this whole point about letting a dog, and if I am going to support something through reinforcement, I'm going to at least try and find the innate behaviors that I've already seen. But even then, we've got to be careful, because are we supporting it in an innately connected way, or are we artificially getting them to do the same thing again? So I think it's really important that we've got to try and let these things grow. Do you find that when people come, especially because I know and this is very important for any caregivers listening, you run a lot of stuff for caregivers who can come along your kind of dog-centered holidays, where they can bring their dog and experience all this as part of a kind of a residentially style setup, isn't it?
Without the residential bit, yeah.
Right, yeah. So I think, but unless you live locally, you've got to stay somewhere, obviously. But do you find that caregivers, especially who come, is there much persuading of getting that mindset to shift? Because it must be quite a culture shock, I guess.
I think we don't actually work on shifting mindset as such. Again, what I don't like is to kind of have a goal. This is what I want to have achieved within such and such, and you need to change. What we do is we, again, kind of like the starting point of basically of what I was saying a little bit earlier on, was about getting people to see what the dogs are saying, and that's it. I mean, that sounds a bit basic, really, but actually, if they can start to see those things, if they can start to see what the dogs are saying, and to then think about how they can help those dogs to feel more comfortable, more confident, think about what the dog is doing at that particular time, then they can start to shift themselves. And really, quite often, we that we do these supported walks, and quite often within the first few minutes, people are changing quite a lot. We start with where the dog is, where the caregiver is. We start with what they can do, and we just offer them an insight, and they make that shift themselves. It's not about us trying to coerce a dog or a person into being what we want them to be, or saying what we think are the right things. It's about giving them opportunities to learn about their dogs, and if they want to make that shift themselves, if they're ready for it, that's fine. But that's it, really.
So where do you feel, trying to frame this question right, do you feel optimistic? Do you feel confident that there is enough conversation going on now, and that there will be a fundamental shift within the next 10 years, 15 years?
I feel very optimistic that things for many people are changing. I think just the fact that that we're having this dialogue, that the things that you're doing within the dog-centered care group, the talks that you're having, the people that you're bringing together that can share their thoughts, that are thinking, that perhaps have thought outside of the box, and possibly, like me, kind of been I've been quite insular. I've been quite guilty of being insular in a way. I've shared things with students and that kind of thing. I'm used to this on Facebook and social media generally, and I don't feel comfortable with it. And so, in a way, and also, I am not somebody who is good at marketing. And so really, I've just been focusing on what we do and how we do it, and so on. And and I think many people perhaps not as much as us or me, have kind of been doing that. You know, the pockets out there, lots of people who are doing lots of fantastic things. But what I see is that now there's dialogue, and now they're seeing that there are other people who are saying perhaps similar things, or parts of things that are similar, and or they're bringing new concepts in, and you know, in a way, we're not bringing anything new in. It's all kind of normal life in a way. It's just that we're talking about it. It's just that we're bringing it to the fore, and it's just that we're not accepting what the other side is, if you like. But I think yes, this dialogue, the groups that you're having, you know, it's all about respecting individuals. It's about respecting their thoughts. There's a lot of empathy now for the dog, for people. It's not just about blinkered, this is what society thinks a dog should be, and this is how we do it. One of the things actually that's kind of changed me a little bit is in other countries, or in some other countries, they're starting to get to the point where rather than looking at the dog and thinking, you know, we need to test the dog to see whether he is a good dog, whether, you know, he can do such and such. They're actually more looking at the people and, you know, what do the people know? What can they do? How can they influence the dog? And that to me is massive, you know. Yeah. So these kind of changes, all of this dialogue is really important for the future. I think, you know, it's very hard to get rid of, and we wouldn't want to necessarily, but to change society, you know, 40, 50 years of one way of thinking about it, of conventional learning theory. And yeah, and there are other learning theories. There are other things to learn, but it's just this one way of thinking about things that has been prevalent for so long. Just saying that there are other learning theories is quite mind-boggling for some people, and it's worth looking into things.
Definitely, 100%. I think definitely this thing about getting people talking and providing safe platforms, and trying also just to remind people about the ability to be able to think a little bit outside the box, as you say, and to feel safe doing that. And definitely within the Dog Centre Care Group, I want to try and foster an environment where people can share things which might be against the mainstream view, but you know, doesn't mean they're any less valid. And I think I talk a lot about the emotional experience, because I think that's the thing I've always been passionate about, even in my human psychology days. And the good thing about the emotional experience, of course, is that we all have one, and most importantly, they're all very unique for us. You know, you and I will very much see and feel and connect to things in a different way, and it's the same for our dogs. And I think what is exciting about this movement, I think it is a movement now, is all these different aspects, all these different pieces of the puzzle give us a better insight into that dog's emotional experience, and giving ourselves time to take a breath and step back and just let the dog tell us some things without feeling we have to go in and kind of micromanage the different responses, I think is very important. I know myself, we're just coming up to the end here actually, but I just want to thank you myself and on behalf of many really, about igniting a conversation that might have taken 20 years to get talked about, but it was being brave enough to kind of start that process in the first place. And I know myself, when I came up and spent that day with you, it really had an impact on me, and we've obviously spoken a lot since, and we stayed in contact. But I'd love to kind of come and spend a bit more time with you. I think that's definitely on my list now of things, because I need more of it. But for me, it was definitely something that was very instrumental for me factoring in the different building blocks that have got me to where I'm thinking about things now. And say we all have our own truths regarding that. So thank you big time for that, Sheila, and especially coming and speaking to us today and being available. As you say, you've kind of stayed off the radar a little bit today. And I just know that loads of people, I'm just looking at some of the comments here. We've started quite a discussion here, and it's been really, really positive. We'll make sure we put some links in the comments. But how can people find out more about the work you do, and how can people connect to the courses that you do?
Okay, so yeah, so there is a website. It has some of the courses. There's a couple of, as you've mentioned, the dog-centered holidays. Still a couple of places left on one. The other one is sold out, unfortunately. We have actually got a lead handling course. It's much more than just lead handling, but for anybody who's interested in some of the kinds of things that I've said today, they might like to have a look at that and you know, and see what's going on there. We are hoping to bring out a book possibly later this year. It's called yeah, so you know, keep an eye out for that. And what's it
called? What's it going to be called?
Well, it has got a title. It hasn't been registered yet, so I'm a little bit hesitant.
No, don't worry, keep that back.
Mention that just for now. I was just about to say it, actually. You know, so there's a few things there, and yeah, I mean, anybody in the local area, we do. Well, actually, I said local area, but we do get people coming from quite a distance just to do an hour's supported walk with us each week. So you know, so there are different things that we have going on at the moment. Unfortunately, we're not traveling to other countries, I mean, that's been a massive part of the last 25 years, really, of you know, of doing that. But yeah, you know, we'll probably be putting on a webinar and perhaps hosting some webinars and things on the website that people can buy into as well at some point. So yeah,
make sure you let us know so we can share those in the group for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Sheila, as always, oh my God, I've just been my mind's buzzing, and there's a kind of 101 things that I could continue talking to you about the things we touched on today, but it's been really inspirational for me, and I really appreciate your time today. And yeah, thank you very much. Maybe you'll come along and have another chat with us so we can go a little bit deeper onto some of these topics. Would be great.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to you know, share a chat with you, and also for, I know that other people have said this too, but for the work that you're doing in bringing people together, it's absolutely invaluable. And the one thing that we have to bear in mind, you know, we respect the dogs, but in these things, we respect each other as well, and that's what we need to. We might have a different point of view, but actually we need to put it over respectfully. But I do appreciate what you're doing, Andy. I think it's a fantastic job. So yeah, hopefully we'll see each other again at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sheila. You look after yourself, and thank you everybody for coming in. We've got Dr. Andrea Breen this Wednesday. It's going to be a corker. I'll put it in the group just as a reminder. It's going to be really amazing. We're going to be covering a lot with Andrea. That's going to be a real smasher. And thanks for everybody that's joined us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye bye.